Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo and more Cross RC MC8. Last time we got the chassis rolling, so now we can have a good crack at the body. Okay, now I could edit up a long video, but for the most part I would be repeating myself, as once you've got the technique for using the plastic weld, most of the build is the same. So I think we'll make the electronics box in detail, then just look at some of the more interesting bits of the build as we go. If you want to see the whole lot though, the build series will end with a complete time lapse. Many hours of building squashed into something a bit more manageable. Anyway, today's video we'll be needing a couple of bits in addition to the plastic parts. We're going to need some Plastic-Weld. Most model shops should keep it in stock or have something similar. It has the consistency of water and it will melt ABS plastic on contact. You need a pair of tweezers, straight or with a bent end will do the job just fine, and a woodworking square with a metal or wood base. These are great for building stuff like this, as you can stand them up. But if you can't get hold of one, a block of wood with a square end will work okay as well. Right then, as I said before, we're going to start with the electronics box, which needs this little lot of bits: base, the lid, ends, corner posts and the sides. Before getting anywhere near it with the Plastic-Weld, you need to get 100% straight in your head on how the bits all go together. It can be a bit of a fiddle, as there's often no self-jigging, but you need to at least partially dry assemble so you can see how the things all fit together. Don't rely completely on the manual, just on the off chance it doesn't quite match the parts that you have. After some messing about, it looks like all the walls get fitted to the top surface of the base, and with it all nicely flush to the sides, which makes it all nice and simple to put together. Grab one of the sides and run a bit of Plastic-Weld along the end of the long face. Put one of the pieces on, make sure any holes are on the right side, and brace it with the square. You'll need to hold it for 15 or 20 seconds to let it harden up a bit. If you don't, it'll just slowly collapse. Find the other end and repeat. Apply some Plastic-Weld, put the bits together and hold it with a square for 20 seconds. It's tempting to barrel on and stick more bits together, but right now this assembly is extremely delicate. You need to give it a few minutes to really harden up, or we will distort it when we move it around. Once the three bits are nice and solid, we can stick the other side on. Drop some Plastic-Weld on the ends of the ends and put the side in place. Square it up with the square, and while the joints are still soft, place it on the base where you can put a little pressure on the new joints and make it line up perfectly. When you're happy with it, put a few drops of Plastic-Weld along the bottom edge. We just want to tack it in place, so you don't need much. Place it back on the base and use the square to match it up with the sides. Now's another good time to leave it for a few minutes to harden up, as it will be a bit easy to slide the bits around accidentally. Okay, corner posts. These aren't 100% square on all sides, so you need to do some trial fits. Turn the post flat around and try again until you get a good fit. When you do, put a couple of drops of Plastic-Weld on and put it in place. Do all four and you guessed it, leave it for a few minutes to harden up. The last bit you need to do is run some extra Plastic-Weld around the inside of the joints. It will wick into any gaps and make sure everything is stuck along the joins. When you're done, you should have a nice solid little box. The same technique is used throughout the build, so I won't explain it all. As you can see, there's an awful lot of parts to put together, and I don't think I can talk about Plastic-Weld for that long. Okay, the first bit to put together is what I think I'll call the front bulkhead. The two tabs are the main mountings to the chassis. For a proper fit, you can loosely mount the tabs to the chassis with a washer between one of them and the chassis rail, just to give a little bit of space. Then see how the tabs line up with the slots. I found they were 1/2 millimeter or so too wide. It might not sound like much, but if you do the screws up too tight, the stress would probably break the tabs off. This is one of those bits that I really should have recorded, but didn't. Oh well. The rest goes together as per the manual. We'll need to fill the gaps around the tabs before we finish though. A little bit of styrene sheet and Plastic-Weld and maybe some resin to make some fillets. Next bit worth mentioning, the cab front panels and side panel can go together just like the electronics blocks. A few drops of plasti weld, stick the two bits together, square it up with the square and hold it. Only this time you'll need to hold it for a bit longer. But after a minute or so it should just about hold itself up. Don't be too violent with it though, but it should be enough to get the bulkhead and floor assembly in to tie it all together, which thoughtfully has some slots in the side panels to fit into. Nice! After the front of the cab is solid, the rear floor can go in. Use the centre wall to make sure everything fits before you add the plasti weld. Keep in mind the whole cab tapers towards the top. When you found a position for the floor, apply a few drops of plasti weld and give it a few minutes to harden. Now you can pop the front of the two window blanks in. I tried to stick it in with some plasti weld but wasn't 100% happy with the strength. If I pushed it I could hear the joint cracking. So I think the window blanks are a different material, so I ended up putting a few drops of Sino on, which seems to have done the trick. After you have the centre wall in and welded, it's a good time to let the whole lot harden up completely. I think it was well past midnight at this stage, so I left it overnight, but an hour or so should be plenty. It'll just make sure that when we're handling it we don't distort our nice clean angles. You can probably see a bit of a lighting change here as I'm sat by a window with the curtains closed. Right, okay, let's move on a bit and to the heel board. It just goes in behind the floor that we fitted at the beginning. Pop it in, make sure it sits nice and flat, dig out one of the headlight covers and check the holes all line up. And as seems to be the theme of this kit, it all lines up nicely, so out comes the plasti weld. These little reinforcing bits could be useful later. They should work a treat for supporting the ends of the false floor if an interior ever goes in. Neat. There's a bit of a gap between them and the bulkhead though, so that's another spot for some styrene and resin. Right, this is a good bit. I'm not following the instructions here, so yes, it's time for some mods. The normal way to access the battery and any of the electronics is to hinge the cab forward, but this only goes so far, making it extremely fiddly to get to anything. For anything more major you have to remove the cab entirely. Not brilliant. The obvious fix is to have the roof removable. Will make life really easy later. So, with the gutters installed and the roof centre section into position and weighted down so it can't move around, we can fit the roof sides to the cab, being extremely careful only to get plasti weld between the angled bits and the cab. Use it sparingly so it won't wick all the way around. When that's dry, the front face of the roof can go on, again just tacked in place for now. I've cut some 3mm thick styrene strips, one for the front, one for the middle and one for the back. All just get welded in place, and while they harden up I'll stick some more bits on. We've got the bumper, these chunky widgets to the rear of the rear arches. That will stiffen everything up quite nicely. What I can only assume is some sort of brush guard, but I can't see that lasting long. Another candidate for a mod at a later date perhaps. Aluminium? Then we have some nice scale bits. These indicator covers, perfect fit. Some handles, again, perfect fit, most impressive. These bits, not 100% sure what they're for, but I won't stick them on just yet as I want to paint them black. But they'll fit on the corners. Neat. The styrene strips have now hardened up a bit, so we can start marking up for the removable roof. First we'll mark the centre of the strips where they come up on the outside of the cab. Pop the roof on and transfer the marks. Do some join the dots, then mark some nicely even spaced holes and drill them to 1.5mm. Pop the roof back on and transfer the holes. Then drill them out to 3mm. On the roof all the holes get a nice layer of tape. And why are we doing all this? Well, because magnets. This will end up with an invisible fixing for the roof. Easy to pop off and get to the innards, but will be plenty strong enough to stay on while we're driving. Pop a magnet into each of the holes and press it down to the tape. The trick here is to be really careful to get them all the same way around, as of course if you get one wrong it will try and push the roof away. When they're all in, pop a drop of thin Sino in behind and give it a stir to make sure the Sino gets past any bubbles. Do the same on the cab, but make sure you get the magnets the right way round so the roof is attached to the cab. Since there's now a large amount of glue that could potentially stick the roof in place, it's probably a good idea to leave it to dry. To be safe, leave it at least an hour, but overnight would be better. It's always better to be safe than have to pry them apart later. And I think that'll do for today. As always, thanks for watching, hope you liked it. If you did, why not leave us a like? And while you're at it, if you're not already subscribed, consider subscribing. You'll get our new videos on your subscription page, so you'll never miss out. We'll have the MC8 running under its own power next week. Exciting stuff. Alright, bye guys.